just turn off your video. Perfect. I'm not going to leave the meeting. Got it. Okay, perfect. It doesn't again. There we go. Okay, so the agenda, we're going to just talk quickly about our goals for tonight. Then we're going to go through Mothers Out Front's 5 priority bills: air quality, energy siting, the future of clean heat, electric new buildings statewide, and the Zero Carbon Renovation Fund. We have a lot to get through in a pretty short period of time, and the way we're going to try and manage this is about 10 minutes per bill. We might give a little bit more to the future of clean heat, but we think it's about a 4-minute overview for each of the folks who are presenting the bills, and then maybe 6 minutes of questions, and we'll try to manage that. And then we'll have some closing tips and next steps that you all might want to think about when you're meeting with your legislators. So the goals for, yeah, go ahead, Carol.
It's just, I still see this meeting is being recorded by the host or participant on the shared screen, so I'm not seeing the whole slide.
Is everybody else still seeing that too?
No? Okay.
You just have to say got it.
Oh, that was individually to me. I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I think this is confusing, as you can tell, so no worries. So the goals for tonight, I really think of them as twofold. The first one is to help everyone get comfortable discussing the priority bills. And a couple of things to keep in mind: you don't have to be an expert on this. It's good to know kind of the high level issues that we're addressing and maybe some of the pushback that you might hear, but you don't have to be an expert. And frankly, for a lot of folks, you're going to know more than your legislator will. So you want to go in comfortable and prepared, but you don't have to know everything. And it's also okay to say, I don't know, and I'll get back to you on that. Totally reasonable. For those of you who want to go deeper and geek out, we do have fact sheets for the bills that will be available to everyone. So you can become an expert if you want to, but you don't need to be. And one of the things to think about tonight is to really listen to the bills and to think about why the bill is important to you, sort of on a personal level, because it really works when you talk to your legislators if that's something that you're sharing, like why this matters to you, why it affects you or people you care about or the world. I think is a really compelling story and something that we should all be thinking about when we meet with people. So helping you get comfortable and then energizing all of you around building connections with your legislators, and particularly asking them to co-sponsor these bills. It's really important, even if your legislators are quote unquote on board, to build these relationships. My legislator is very much on board. This is a picture of our team with Jay Livingstone, who's our rep. But when these bills are being passed, there's often a lot of last minute juggling and changing, and some of the specifics really matter. And if you have a relationship with your legislator, you can become a source for information for them and make sure that what we want gets through at the end. So it's just really great if they know you and trust you and have a relationship with you. At the end, we have some time. We'll share some tips on meeting with the legislators and how to make those as effective as possible. And we'll get to that soon. Okay, so the first bill, the air quality bill, Susan Lees is going to take us through that.
Hello, good to see you all. The full name of the air quality bill is an act to improve outdoor and indoor air quality for communities burdened by pollution. The bill numbers, as you can see there, are H2131 and S1382. The sponsors are Representatives Christine Barber and Mike Connolly and Senator Patricia Jalen. And this bill was put forward by the Environmental Justice Table. Everyone deserves to breathe clean air. Thank you. We can stay there for a minute. Outdoors and indoors, breathing clean air is a matter of life and health. Yet every day, pollution is emitted into the atmosphere, a huge contributor being our transportation systems, cars, planes, and boats. With the pollution falling most heavily on environmental justice populations, people of color, indigenous people, low-income people, and limited English proficient speakers. And every day as well, so many residents of EJ communities are impacted indoors by the same outdoor pollution which comes into their homes. Another key indoor air problem addressed in this bill is mold in rental housing. And gas stoves add yet more dangerous pollutants indoors. Health impacts can include asthma, developmental delays, COPD, stroke, cancer, premature birth, and more. So how can this bill help? Overall, as the EJ table states, passing this air quality bill will improve indoor and outdoor air quality, especially for EJ populations and residents burdened by pollution from congested roadways and ports, gas stoves, and mold in rental housing. I like that sentence. Here are the key provisions. So we could go to the next slide. Thank you. I'll read them a little differently than's there. Key provisions. Number 1, expand outdoor air monitoring in pollution hotspots, which will be identified by a newly formed technical advisory committee. And then in these hotspots, when they're identified, will set and achieve ambitious air pollution reduction targets for 2030 and 2035. I think it's up to 75% reduction by 2035. The monitoring will include the dangerous ultrafine particulate matter and black carbon soot. Number 2, more immediate action is required to protect people. The bill will require air filters in certain existing buildings near congested roadways in these identified hotspots. Buildings such as schools, residential buildings with more than 2 tenant occupied units, and correctional facilities, all these within 200 meters of congested roadways. 3, advanced filtration systems for new construction of certain buildings in these hotspots will be required. These would include daycare facilities, residential developments, hospitals, schools, long-term care facilities, school-age childcare programs, nursing homes, and even more than that. Number 4, there are 5 of these. Update the state sanitary code to require annual mold inspections and create clear timelines for remediating mold in rental housing. And in this air quality bill, mold is extensively addressed. We don't have in Massachusetts any laws right now that specifically address a landlord's duties or liability when it comes to mold prevention and remediation. 5, the bill will update building code to prevent installation of gas stoves in new construction and major rehabilitation projects. Gas stoves, as we know, pollute. Nitrogen oxide, benzene, fine particulate matter, not good. Summary, the bill will identify pollution hotspots through the new advisory committee, which includes members of impacted communities, then set targets for pollution reduction in the hotspots. It will protect many from indoor air pollution through the installation of air filters and air filtration systems, and finally prevents putting gas stoves in new construction or major renovation projects. I think there's one more slide. We just finished this for our calendars. There is an air quality bill launch and community gathering on May 4th in Somerville from 5 to 6, organized by the EJ table. And we're trying to turn out. They've asked us to please turn out mothers out front, and we're going to do our best to do that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Max, you're muted.
I don't see any questions in the chat. So can we, if someone has a question, they want to put their hand up with the reaction button, and we can, well, Susie.
I can't find my reaction button. No, there it is. I have a quick question because I know that they do, just because we've worked with the East Boston team a lot. It's one of the 4 Boston teams. And they've talked about the fact that they already do, the state and or the federal government already does some air quality monitoring. But my understanding in this bill is that it's a better kind or a new kind. Does anybody know anything about that? Or maybe it's more monitoring, just more of the, I don't know, tools that they use to monitor. Does anybody on the call know anything about that? No, okay.
Well, I think maybe I can answer that. Not quite sure what the question is. They do have monitors. The state has, CEC has monitors in various places. But not near the airport. The closest one, I think, is in what used to be called Dudley Square. So there's some academic research going on, specifically Olin College of Engineering, that has set up air quality monitors in various places under the runways, under the runways, and is monitoring particulate matter there. It's very upsetting when you see the amount of particulate matter that is being spewed out by the aircraft at Logan. And Logan's number of operations is increased almost to, I think, if not equal to the pre-COVID levels. So it's not just vehicular traffic, it's also aircraft traffic.
Yes, and this covers transportation, planes, boats, cars. And I'll just say, like, when dealing with the Fore River Basin, there are monitors somewhere, but they're not near where they need to be. There are state monitors, but it's up here and they need to know what's going on here. So they've tried to raise money to put in their own monitors and, use some inexpensive monitors place them around the basin. That's what I know.
I think East Boston also got, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Also, the state and federal government do not, I think, Barbara, am I correct? But they don't do the fine particulates. They only do the particulates, but not the fine ones.
I think there's no testing now for the ultrafine particulates in this, so that's going to be included here.
And Susan, there's a question about the mold testing, whether that would be done annually, and would it apply to all rental units in the state? Do you know?
As far as I know, the testing, what does it say? Would they test every year? I might have to, is that Toby?
Yeah.
I might have to get back to you on that, but what was the second part of that question?
And does it apply to every rental unit, or I would assume that it implies in a certain size building, or every rental unit?
Let me put what I know in the chat in a minute, okay?
Okay. Shall we move on to the next bill?
Yes, we'll move on to the next bill. So now we're going to have Carol Chamberlain talk to us about the energy siting bill.
Let's get set. Okay. Hi. I'm going to model how you talk about a bill when you don't really know that much about it. Just using our materials. The Energy Facility Siting Bill also came out of the EJ table. The formal title is an act relative to energy facility siting improvement to address environmental justice, climate, and public health. And the sponsors are Representative Madaro and Senators DeMonico and Edwards. And this is also a priority of Mass Power Forward, as well, of course, as the EJ table. And why do we need a bill like this? Okay, can we have the next slide, please? Okay, this is a little hard to read, but basically each arrow is pointing to some sort of toxic facility. This is the Fore River Basin. And this is what it looked like before they added the Weymouth compressor station. It's a true sacrifice zone and dumping ground. And oh no, you can't see my my pointer, but This includes the storage facility that has toxic materials where there was a fire recently and was luckily stopped before it reached a huge amount of toxic materials that would have made it a lot worse. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? And of course, when you have one of your cities, Springfield, Massachusetts, being the asthma capital of the United States, why not put in a biomass plant? Right? I mean, they don't consider what else is going on. Luckily, that particular thing has been stopped. Next slide. And here is our East Boston team with mothers advocating for clean air and for offsetting some of the pollution that's coming from Logan. And this is East Boston fighting against the electrical substation that is in a dangerous position. Oh, and also East Boston and Chelsea and Winthrop already have really overburdened with polluting industry. Next slide. So we mothers, we think everyone has a right to clean and healthy environment. But too often polluting power plants, electrical substations, and gas compressor stations are concentrated in communities where people of color, low-income people, and limited English proficient speakers live and work. These environmental justice populations experience higher rates of pollution, disease, and other public health emergencies. Environmental justice communities have organized, spoken out, and united their elected leaders in opposition to the siting of energy facilities in their neighborhoods. But their efforts have been thwarted by utilities and industries. These communities should not continue to be destroyed by the irresponsible siting of energy facilities. The energy facility siting bill would require all proposals for an energy generating facility to take into account need, public health, environmental and climate risks and burdens, and energy, economic, and health effects for communities within 5 miles of the facility. It would have to justify itself if it was within 5 miles of any environmental justice populations, and it would have to give all stakeholders a voice from the very beginning of the process. In addition, the Energy Facility Siting Board, which is the group that evaluates the siting of energy facilities, it would no longer be they would no longer be able to consider each facility as though it was standing all by itself. When the Weymouth compressor station was being evaluated, all its pollution and damage and release of toxic chemicals were evaluated as though that was the only, those were the only things in the air to affect the local population, ignoring the 10 or so other facilities that had already contributed many pollutants. So that is a passage of this bill would mean greater equity in siting decisions and consequently reduce burdens on environmental justice communities that are already overburdened. So mothers all over Massachusetts are asking our legislators for their support. Other things that this bill would do, besides requiring consideration of EJ, public health and climate, is lower the threshold for projects that must be reviewed from 100 megawatts to 35 megawatts. Right now, the East Boston substation doesn't fall under the Energy Facility Siting Board because I believe it's around 66 megawatts. So that's something that could help. Also, they want the board to expedite reviews of new solar, wind, and geothermal projects to really help fast track them so we can reduce our reliance on the bad stuff. So that is what's going on, and I'm now ready for questions.
We have a question about the asthma in Springfield. Do you happen to know the source of that asthma? Like what makes it so high there?
I'm not sure. I believe that there are some polluting industries nearby that Springfield, the way air patterns work, they get concentrated in Springfield. And they're not number one every year, but they have been number one or close to number one in the United States for a long time.
So a couple of questions about, Andy, why don't you come off mute and ask your question or state your comment?
Hi, Carol. Thank you so much for presenting this. I'm just curious. I think that there was a very similar bill, and maybe it's just a similar name, that was introduced last session. And my memory is that Barrett rejected it because he was very concerned that the way it was written was so broad and how the communities could reject any energy facility, that he was afraid that like it would prevent clean energy from being cited as well, sort of like a NIMBY for everyone. And I'm just wondering if you know whether this bill is sort of that last bill but updated, and if you know if people who wrote it were in communication with Barrett around those definitions, and whether some of that has been worked out.
I don't know. I do believe this is basically the same bill. And I'm not sure if they have worked with Senator Barrett. I think I remember that they were going to, but it is a radical notion to many politicians for the communities to have that much power. And so I'm sorry I don't have more information. I can find out.
And then there was also a question about, as we electrify further, we're going to need more electricity infrastructure, like substation. Is it the substation itself that's a problem, or where it's located?
I believe it's where it's located. They want to put it in one of the few remaining green spaces in East Boston. And I also believe it's near stored jet fuel.
Right.
And things like that. And they still could relocate it somewhere on Logan Airport's territory and be further away from dangerous, things that if something went wrong with the substation, things that would be affected. Susan, do you have any more information on that?
I absolutely do.
We just have to be a little quick, guys.
Oh, okay.
I was only going to add that I think Springfield, one of the problems there is the mold, and that they pushed hard for that to be in this, in the air quality bill, just in terms of air quality. But sorry, Andy, did you want to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say the substation is in a flood zone and could explode if flooded, and that would be a major problem because it's right next to a park where children play. So it basically kind of takes away the public good of the park, because parents would be fearful to allow their children to play there.
Great, that's helpful.
Yeah,
All
the
right, guys,
other thing I want to say is that some cities and states are starting to realize, oh, you want to build another electric substation? Let's look into doing a microgrid instead, which is recently done in an area of New York City. So yes, we will need some electrical substations, but it would do the whole system a lot of good if we started having localized microgrids.
Great. All right, guys, sorry to cut off the conversation, but I think we need to go on to the future of clean heat, and Lee Kettleson's going to take us through that.
Hi, everyone. Good to see you. Well, I'm very excited about this legislation. It will create a vital systems change for home energy. And as you all know, we don't have time to fiddle around. Next slide. already. Next slide. Okay. The future of clean heat. You may remember that was the name of our campaign of postcards to the gas companies. And you will remember this graphic from our flyer. This illustrates the system change that we need to bring about. We had a key slogan that we have repeated on flyers. Next slide. Our families need homes that are all electric, safe, and affordable for all. And the future of clean heat legislation leads us to that goal. And off of combusting fuels that are dangerous to our health, safety, and climate. That is how you can talk with your mother's voice to your legislators. There are many provisions in this big bill, and so I will focus on giving suggestions of what you might highlight to legislators. First, explain that this bill sets out a comprehensive strategy for an efficient, cost-effective, and just transition off gas. Next slide. Explain to them that the gas companies must make a plan to retire their gas system. The State Department of Public Utilities would oversee the plan and develop sticks and carrots to move them forward. But then talk about the money. Next slide. Tell them that our ratepayer funds are being used now by the gas companies to rebuild their gas distribution system. They are actively replacing aging pipes under our streets that could be repaired with pipes designed to carry the dangerous blended gases that they are planning to pump into our homes forever. Economist Dory Seavey projects that the gas companies would spend up to $40 billion in the coming decades to replace their pipes if we don't stop them. This is the public's money that should be going into building retrofits and electrification. This is squandering our funds on what should become stranded assets. Tell your legislator they must stop the gas company plans this session. Redirect our money to a livable future. And then tell them about triage and transition. Next slide. It's a catchy slogan to stick in their head, and as our Ellie Goldberg also calls it, retire and rewire. The bill requires them, where possible, to fix leaking pipes, and for the most leak-prone pipes, to transition that area to neighborhood electrification. What does this look like? Next slide. Here's what the gas companies would do. Become thermal energy companies. Thermal energy comes from the ground or the air. They install, as appropriate, either networked geothermal ground source heat pumps or electric air source heat pumps and exchange out other appliances to be electric. And this bill also provides that other entities are allowed to compete with the utilities as thermal energy providers. Then you can talk about equity in the transition. Next slide. The bill creates a thermal energy trust fund of $40 million a year to help low-income families make the transition and to retrain gas workers. Lastly, we want to tell them about the dangers to our health and our climate that will happen if the legislature does not stop the gas companies from their plan to add hydrogen and biomethane to what they pump through our streets and into our homes. Next slide. Importantly, the bill bans hydrogen for distribution to buildings and tightly restricts biomethane. Gas Transition Allies, the coalition leading the push for this legislation, has great fact sheets on hydrogen dangers that Andy helped with, that you can give them, that was found on their website. Finally, be sure to invite your legislators to attend, next slide, May 10th legislative briefing on the bill held by the bill's sponsors. You are also encouraged to attend, put it on your calendars, shirt up and show up on May 10th. So I think my time is up and I'm eager to hear your questions.
That was great. That's a complicated bill. Thank you, Lee. I mean, yeah. Do we have questions, Max?
Nothing in the chat.
No questions.
That's unbelievable.
I have a question. You can see me, Anne.
Ann
right?
will get us started. Ann Wright.
I mean, this is, I guess, Yeah, it's related. Has anybody heard whether it's been verified that some of the wider circumference pipes that have been being laid, I think in Arlington, my town, and Newton, are being laid in preparation for mixing hydrogen or synthetic methane or whatever they're calling it?
What
And-
Yeah, I do have some answer on that. We had a discussion with like Audrey and Zainab from Heat about what we could say on that. And what they think is accurate to say is that those pipes are consistent with a blended gas future. That this was, I wrote down their words, so I didn't get it wrong. But like, it's not,
Mhm.
I was hearing us say hydrogen ready pipes, but that's, they may not, no pipe, as we want to say, no pipe can carry hydrogen safely,
Uh-huh.
nor blended gases. But these types of pipes, they said, are consistent with a blended gases future.
Sue Stafford
Thank
has a
you.
question.
Can you say more about the funding required and the funding that would be provided if this bill is passed?
It is a part of it is requirements on the gas companies to develop plans. So there isn't any specific, how would they shift their funding? But they are, as they are required, that the bill does require them to only fix pipes in, and if not possible and they're super leaky pipes, to transition the area to electrification. This would change their incentive structure. It changes, and also there is a specific fee put on ratepayers that would create that thermal energy transition fund. And Ed Collins is on this, so if I got that wrong, Ed, you can add more. Because he's an
Okay.
expert. You
Yeah,
don't
I
have to,
think-
but
I think there's the 1.5 per therm fund for focusing hopefully on low-income people to make them able to be electrified. And then there's also, this will be ratepayer funded eventually. There's nothing the gas and electric companies that do that is not ratepayer funded, except for the use of the settlements that are funding part of the some of the projects that we're seeing going on in the state.
it's basically, they're going to have, it's requiring them to shift how they use their funds and investor funds, and therefore it spreads it all out over time and over all the ratepayers.
Thank you.
Carol's got her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say, remember that right now, the gas companies are using ratepayer funds to unnecessarily replace pipes because they make more money that way. If you look at where, under that GSEP program, tens, incredible amounts of money. So they need to change the incentives of some of that money that the ratepayers are paying could be used for these conversions.
I saw Carol Walker raise her hand.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it on the computer, so I don't know how to do it. Are we getting these slides after? Because I like to look at the slides that you showed us. Do we get them in like tomorrow or something?
I think I can work with folks to make sure you guys can access the slides and also access the recording. So I'll put that on my list of things to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I know there's probably more questions here. Ed, do you mind holding your question just because I want to get to the other bills, or do you have a
Certainly.
lot?
No,
Okay,
no problem. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. Okay, now we're going to move on to the building electrification bill, and Ann Berwick is going to take us through that.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, and thank you all for listening to this. I have really the easy job as compared to everyone else who's spoken this evening, because this bill, KCON's H3183, an act relative to the electrification of new and substantially remodeled buildings, is very straightforward. It really bites off the easiest piece, the low-hanging fruit, and addresses the fact that we shouldn't be building new buildings with fossil fuels that are going to have to be remodeled in the very near future to address climate change. So all new construction and substantial renovation should be all electric. So why is that? Probably most of you know, but I'll just say very quickly, we should be using, counterintuitively, we should be using more electricity, not less, and to do everything that we need to do. And the reason for that is that electricity can be made cleaner with renewable resources like solar and wind and hydropower, and diesel, fuel, gasoline, natural gas for heating fuels, fuel oil cannot be made cleaner. So more electricity replaces dirty fossil fuels, and the electricity is increasingly getting cleaner as the grid gets cleaner, especially with more offshore wind that we're about to see off the coast of New England and the mid-Atlantic. Interestingly, some of the competing bills or the other bills that would require electrification are opt-in. This bill is not an opt-in bill. It's simply the case that if you build a new building or do a substantial reconstruction, you have to electrify it. And think about it. Why opt in anyway? Do we let lead paint laws be up to the decision of cities and towns, or smoke detectors? No. I mean, in general, when something is an issue of safety or public health, it's not opt-in, it's a mandate. Pushback. Let me anticipate a couple questions. Isn't this too expensive? Do heat pumps for heating buildings work in cold weather? Too expensive? No, there are lots of studies showing that, especially for new construction, the cost is in the cost of new construction is in the neighborhood of 1 or 2% increase as compared to building with conventional approaches. And then, of course, those buildings that are built conventionally are going to have to be addressed and rejiggered in the very near future. Another objection you'll hear, which is completely a myth, is that heat pumps don't work in cold weather. So Maine has more, the state of Maine has probably more heat pumps per capita than any other state. My family has a house in New Hampshire where it got exceedingly cold a few weeks ago. We're only heated with heat pumps. We're fine. So that's a myth. So I imagine there will be other questions, and I am very happy to take them. But just keep in mind, this is a really simple, straightforward bill. Just new buildings, rehabilitations have to be all electric. Let's not build them with fossil fuels that have to be replaced within the next very few years. Okay, I'm done. Yes, all buildings.
And I have a question too. I can't see everybody's hands. Can I jump in?
Go for it.
Do you know what percentage rehabs? Is it like 50%, 75% floor space being rehabilitated? Or
That's 50% of the building space.
50?
I'm really interested to know, and I don't know the answer, to what percentage of like residential remodels are 50% or more. I'm imagining most are not, right?
In Arlington, before we passed, before we wrote our warrant article on fossil fuel free, we did a study of like how to decide whether to set it at 50 or 75 or what. And it made almost no difference. I mean, there's not that much new building in Arlington. Obviously in the city, it would make more of a difference, but so we set it higher just so we wouldn't risk turning people off and thinking, oh, 50%, that's lots. So just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
And Susie mentions that developers are pushing back, saying that there won't be enough electricity to make this transition if we go everywhere all at once. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I actually wrote a memo for the Newton City Council and the mayor on that very topic, which I'm happy to make available.
Great.
Obviously, we have to attend to that problem, but it's not a secret that we have to electrify this country. And so everybody who has responsibilities in this regard is focused on it, right? FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, ISO New England, Department of Public Utilities. We will have enough electricity. And one of the reasons we will is because the Biden administration has committed to 30 gigawatts of new offshore wind before 2030. And remember also, a requirement to electrify new buildings is not, it's not going to increase the amount of electricity needed overnight. And importantly, these buildings are being built to new building code standards. And so would actually require, in many instances, less electricity than buildings because of efficiency requirements than buildings that are being built to conventional standards. So I am not worried about the availability of electricity to deal with these issues. Is it going to take attention? Are we going to have to deal with it? Does the transmission system have to be upgraded? Does the distribution system have to be upgraded? Yes. But again, the fact that we need to electrify not just the state, but the country is not coming as a secret to anybody who deals with these issues.
Great. Okay, I think we should move on to our last bill. And we have Ann Wright talking about the Zero Carbon Renovation Fund.
Okay, hi, everybody. Like Anne, my bill is not complicated. However, I have a hard job in that I'm the last, and I hope everybody isn't losing focus. So if you need to jump up and look around for a minute and clear your head of all these facts, please do. But I'll get started. I'm going to follow that the kind of template of thinking where we say our values, the problem, and then what we're doing about it. That National Mothers Out Front suggested, and then we in Massachusetts said, hey, let's try that. So besides, of course, we all believe in the right and the need for a clean energy future and to stop climate change, we also believe that everybody has a right to safe, comfortable, and affordable housing justice. But in Massachusetts and around the country, housing is increasingly unaffordable. It's a very serious crisis. People are forced to move far from jobs or family members and have long commutes. Families are doubled or tripled up in apartments or rooms. Energy costs are too high, and energy systems are unsafe, causing in our houses asthma, lung disease, cancer, or risk of explosion. We also know that to reach our emissions goals in Massachusetts, we need to decarbonize our home quickly. The Baker administration proposed 100,000 houses per year for this entire decade. And of course, we're way, way behind that goal already. So what to do about this? These two problems are triple problems. Massachusetts advocates and some legislators have written a bill, the Zero Carbon Renovation Fund bill, that would invest $300 million from funds we already have to advance building decarbonization and invest in renewable energy and infrastructure and workers' trainings in our state. It would prioritize renovations in environmental justice communities so that while we're decarbonizing, we are also addressing the historic inequity in housing for low and moderate income people and people of color. Because we are really at risk, say we didn't do this kind of equity focus. We are really at risk as all this IRA money, Inflation Reduction Act money flows in. We are at risk because of racism and classism and inequity that the higher income communities end up with sort of shiny, gleaming, warm, well-insulated, decarbonized houses, and minority populations in EJ communities have leaky and expensive to heat and unsafe housing, still reliant on the gas system as we transition out of it. This really has to be a focus, that housing inequity. Also, just to say that this Zero Carbon Renovation Fund bill would also set aside money to invest in minority and women-owned businesses. So we're addressing the historic hold that white men have on the construction industry. And of course, it would also make progress toward our climate goals of reducing emissions by 50% by 2030 and retrofitting 1 million buildings in the next 8 years or decade. So, we have a lot of influence with legislators. We can make a difference by getting sponsors, more and more sponsors for this bill, and encouraging our allies in organizations and our allies in the Healy administration to support it. So I haven't been looking at my slides, but let's see. So you can, when you get these slides, you can check and see if your rep or senator have co-sponsored it. If they have, of course, thank them. If they haven't, get on them and ask them to sponsor. And I think I've already reviewed these provisions. Next slide, please. Can you forward it to the next slide?
I think this is the only slide I have for you.
I added a second this afternoon.
Oh, there you go. I was wrong.
Sorry to not
Magic.
warn you. Just a few little quirks about the bill. You might have heard at the very beginning, it was asking for 300 million of ARPA funding. Then a couple weeks ago, the coalition that's working on this was told that ARPA funds are all gone. They're actually not. There's more than $2 billion, more or less, that actually was left, but it was put in an escrow account. And so we've changed the wording. Don't, if you're talking to your rep or senator, don't say we want $300 million of ARPA funding. Say we want $300 million of funding that the state already has, not to be taxed in additional taxes, because that's what people are scared about. No new taxes. Also, we just learned that there's sort of a similar initiative that somebody hasn't even filed as a bill yet, but they're looking to attach it to another bill or something. It's for 500 million, but it's pretty different from this. It's to give to Mass Save through the utilities for weatherization. Not terrible things, but it really is different. This is very equity oriented, and it's certainly not going through the utilities. So that's about it. There was a really good briefing in that same room in the State House that we're going to be in on May 10th held. There are a lot of people there. There are a lot of sponsors. It's good, but of course we need more. And that's all I have. Any questions? I can't see everybody's hands. Anybody's hands?
Also not seeing any hands or anything in the chat. We've
I have a
been,
quick question.
go ahead. ahead.
Do we have clarity around why we've been so slow on the Mass Save front in pushing to get the 1 million homes transitioned? And will this be fundamentally different approach, do you think?
Mass Save is very complex, but I've been trying to learn more and more about it. It goes in 3-year plans, and we're just in year 1 of this current 3-year plan. The old 3-year plan really worked against us. It really promoted fossil fuels and staying on gas. Now that's a little better. There's a little more nod toward and help for people to electrify, and there's some good incentives and subsidies and actually. Utility money, and I have sources on that if you're interested. But you know, it's still slow. We're humans, people, those mass save providers and contractors, they don't necessarily know how to do this, or they don't believe what we believe about the dangers of methane gas.
I do
So,
think that's part of this. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I do think one of the exciting things in my mind about this bill that I'm hoping to talk to my legislator about is that it will sort of jumpstart this business. Because you're right, it's hard to find people who know what they're doing. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that is starting to change, but
Yeah, I mean,
um,
300 million is still a drop in the bucket, honestly, but
true.
you know, there's the IRA funding, there's the
Yeah.
BIL, bipartisan infrastructure, there's lots of money. And it's all going to be kind of flowing into this river of jumpstarting, you know, small contractors, good training, women in BIPOC owned businesses, better HVAC installers than the ones that installed mine that weren't so great 3 years ago, honestly. It's, you know, it's a process. So hope that answers a little of your question.
We've got a question from
Thank you.
Toby.
Yeah, quick question. Thank you, Anne. Does the bill talk about who is going to administer the distribution of this money?
Yes, good question. Mass CEC is the proposal, the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, which is public-private. Now, I know everybody doesn't agree with that, and some people have fears that they would have to get much, much bigger quickly. Yeah, TBD, I guess.
Okay, I think we can move on unless there are any more questions. Before we move on from the bills, is there some pressing question on one of these bills that we should get to from anybody? Nope. Okay. All right, I'm going to hand it off to Max to close up.
So we've been hearing that many of us are out there already meeting with legislators. If we haven't started, it's a good time to schedule because it does sometimes take some time to get on the calendar. If you need help figuring out what your legislator has already co-sponsored, reach out to someone on the legislative team. We're happy to help. As Susie said in the beginning, it's really great to make these a personal pitch so that you can speak with some passion about why it's important to you as a constituent. So it's likely to be important to other constituents in their legislative district. 4 to 6 people makes a great meeting. We always recommend bringing some old hands and some new hands so that every time you meet with your legislator, it's new faces and we are an endless stream of people. It's great when everybody can have a role in the presentation. Don't forget to ask, directly ask, will you co-sponsor this bill? And why it will benefit them to do so. And then always the thank you email. So I think we can move to the final slide. We're really appreciative of so many people coming out tonight to learn about these bills. The more you hear them, the easier it gets to talk about them naturally and to put your own spin on it. And we just wanted to end with the reminder that we're actually doing a real service for legislators, and they will thank you because they are generalists. They get all kinds of things that they're expected to know about. And when we can come in and make a bill personal and a value statement and the benefits are clear, they're very appreciative of that. So it's a good thing. It's a good thing for us to help with. It always feels good to meet with legislators.
Great. And just one more thing before we go, we'll follow up with this group. I'll talk to the legislative team and get you links to the recording, the slides, and maybe the fact sheets as well, just so you're armed with everything that we have as a follow-up. And I also really want to thank our presenters. Thank you for talking about the bills and making them so accessible to all of us. We really appreciate it. And I think that's it.